Welcome to Stand Out in Search with FAQ Rich Results. My name is Martha Van Berkel, and I will be your host today. And Jeff and I are just really delighted to have the opportunity to share our knowledge and ensure that you have what you need in order to really maximize how you're using FAQ Schema Markup. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. I am joined in the virtual cloud by my co-founder, Mark Van Berkel, and Anna Pekovic, who is one of our customer success managers. They will be answering your questions throughout this presentation, and then we will also do Q&A at the end. Within the Zoom webinar, you'll see a Q&A section. So just go ahead and put your question in there, and we will endeavor to answer it. And again, we love helping you learn, find resources. So if it's about Schema Markup or FAQ, ask away. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I always like to start with introducing myself with our knowledge graph. And so this is me. Before starting Schema App, I spent 14 years at Cisco. I have a technical background in mathematics and engineering, had the great opportunity to attend MIT, and I am the co-founder of Schema App. I am Canadian, and I'm also a mom, and I thought this was a great opportunity to switch up my knowledge graph and introduce Ruth and Garrick, my children, who hopefully won't be interrupting us during our webinar. And I also decided that, my job title is usually CEO at Schema App, but these days I feel like I'm also, full-time parent, teacher, cleaner, and entertainer with everything that's going on in the world. Today, I'm honored to be joined with Jeffrey Burns. Jeff, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Jeffrey. I am the customer success team lead at Schema App. I'm an alumni of York University where I studied philosophy. I'm Canadian. I'm an alumni of Webware where I worked as a digital marketer and also in sales. And I'm a humongous Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
That's too bad there's no Stanley Cup happening right now, right?
Yet to be determined.
Today's sponsor is Schema App, and Schema App has an enterprise solution that works with all websites, all content without an IT developer for Schema Markup. And all the basic and advanced examples we're showing you today can all be done in Schema App. And we work with some great innovators and thought leaders in the industry, SAP, King Footwear, and Advent Health. And if you're interested in how we can help you, feel free to reach out to us after this webinar. So today, what are we going to go through? We're going to start with a baseline on what is Schema Markup and why it's important. And then I always like to throw in a little bit of Schema Markup news. There's some exciting things going on, so we'll cover that. And then we'll get into some fundamentals that are going to be really important in order for you to get the most out of the FAQ Schema Markup examples and strategies that we're talking about. So we'll talk a little bit about connected Schema Markup, then we'll go through the feature, and then we'll dig into some examples of how this can fit into different content on your site. And then finally, we'll address sort of impact to clicks from FAQ, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So as much as Google's gotten smarter and more sophisticated over the years, it's a machine. It doesn't really have the human ability to really understand the content on their sites. And every day, all of us search for different questions and information, whether that be through a search engine, through our phone, through our watch, through a computer, or through a Google Home Assistant or Alexa. And so in order to help these machines really understand, truly understand what the content on our websites are about, they got together and created schema.org. Now, schema.org is a vocabulary, or think of it as a language of search engines, where they define different definitions, different properties in order to them, explain what these things are. There's extensions for automotive, health, finance, bibliographic, and it was really a large collaborative effort across Yandex, Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. And this community continues to grow. They work together in order to make sure that the right vocabulary is out there in order for us to optimize our different types of content. And even during this time of COVID, I'll share later, that they've responded to that to make sure that organizations have the right Schema Markup in order to be able to get their messages out or special announcements out. Now, you'll often hear the terms Schema Markup and structured data thrown around. Now, Schema Markup and structured data are really the action you do to apply schema.org to your website. And we really much prefer schema markup instead of structured data because schema markup is a much more specific way of explaining it, whereas structured data can be something structured in a table. And since the whole purpose is to be as specific as possible, you'll hear us often use or primarily use schema markup, but know that these are interchangeable. Now, if you apply the schema markup, which was built by the machines, in order to promote understanding, they've also introduced features to help increase findability. And so a lot of the rich results that we talk about and what we're looking at, like why should we do this FAQ schema markup we're talking about today, is so that you can really stand out in search. And so these are just some examples of how using FAQ schema markup, which we're focused on today, really increase the amount of real estate that you get in search results. And rich results are often the driver as to why people adopt this. But there's also strong business reasons for doing schema markup. And here is a list of some of Google's case studies that talk about the impact of doing schema markup. Everything from boosting organic traffic to increasing time on site to increased conversions. And the link on the page here, you can read these in detail. With all of our clients, we've really seen an impact throughout that customer journey through your website, whether it be in the search engines, on site, and then through conversion. And so there's really, hard numbers and a strong business case as to why schema markup should be sort of foundational to your SEO strategy. I think what I'm most excited about, though, is that it continues to take off and we continue to see investment. And, Mark and I have been doing this for a long time. We first sort of built Schema App back in 2014. We were just a little bit ahead of the market. But in 2019, we saw a huge acceleration of both the features, reports, as well as releases of the schema.org vocabulary. And then in December, it was like just amazing time for those of us that love schema markup. It was named the #1 trend out of Google's Webmaster Conference. It was also the #6 trend on the top 10 important SEO trends for 2020. And we've actually seen continued acceleration and investment through schema.org with 6 releases in just 2020. And just to give perspective, they only did 7 releases in all of 2019, and it's just April 30th. So I don't know, but I get kind of excited to think that 2020 is actually the year of schema markup and the time that you should be considering adopting it and leveraging it within your SEO strategies. Now, you can't write this stuff. I say it's the year of schema markup, and then the White House on April 15th actually releases an article that says we call chief information officers to update their websites with these new schema tags. So the White House is telling you to adopt schema markup. Now, this is in relationship to COVID-19 and getting information out, but seriously, I can't write this stuff. So with regards to COVID, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the schema markup news around new releases that have been going on in order to support organizations getting information out. And so version 7 of schema.org was accelerated in order to get special announcement, COVID testing facilities, and then also some changes for us to allow people to communicate what was happening with events, whether they were canceled, postponed, or rescheduled, or moved to a virtual situation. Now, if you're looking to adopt COVID-19, we've also created a guide to adopting it and are more than happy also to provide free support if you're trying to figure out how to apply this for special announcements. We've been partnering with different health organizations and hospitals in order to make sure that they can get word out there in order to serve their communities. And so it's our way of giving back. Now, Google has also made some other announcements. There's been lots of debate over the years as to whether you could use JavaScript to do structured data. Well, now we have a guide that says they fully support it and how to do it. So the debate's over. You can use JavaScript or Google tags in order to do structured data. And then another announcement around Google updating their search documentation. There's constantly updates. They're now actually tracking those updates. You can see I can barely fit what they've even just updated in the last week and a half with regards to changes that they've made to their features. And so this is an ever-evolving SEO strategy. Now, just like the stories I just shared in the news, your schema markup actually also connects to tell a story. And really, your markup explains how things are related to other things on your website, as well as to other things in the world. And when you're trying to start telling this story with your schema markup, You follow the schema markup process. You start with strategy, you then create the markup, get it on your site, and then as Google makes changes, you maintain it, report on the benefit, and so on. And what we're going to cover now is like, as you start going into the schema markup process, there's some key fundamentals that are important to understand so that when we give you the advanced and examples for FAQ, that you can make sure that you understand and can apply them. So the first thing is, please don't put the same schema markup on every page. As we started at the beginning, schema markup is trying to help the search engines understand explicitly what the page is about. And so if every page has schema markup saying it's an organization, which page is actually talking about the organization? And how is Google or others supposed to figure that out? So we really want to talk about the primary topic or entity that we want to mark up that page about, and not be sort of putting peanut butter schema markup on every page so it's not clear. The other piece we don't want to do is create islands of schema markup. If you remember that slide I had where we connect a story, it's really about defining the relationships between things. And we're going to give you a whole bunch of different examples of what that looks like, especially with FAQ. And this will help also understand the understanding or the meaning of the page. So it's not about a video, an FAQ, an article, a product, and a rating, but it's about a product that has a video and that contains an FAQ. And so the other piece here is around nesting that markup within the primary topic of the page. And I think this is best illustrated sort of if we look at sort of how we do this and then an example. So when you're trying to do nesting of schema markup, you're going to use properties within schema.org that are strong connectors. So we really, really like about or mentions or subject of and has part. And these really mean what the English means, like it's about something, or it's mentioning something in the piece, or it is the subject of, which is kind of the opposite of about, or has part. And so let's look at an example. So over the last couple of weeks, actually Jeff, who's on the phone, referred me to this. John Krasinski, who some of you may know as Jack Ryan or Off the Office, his daughters like created this big sign, and he's been producing a show called Some Good News. And is focused on good news. It's a really sort of uplifting YouTube news channel. And so this article that it was in the Boston News is a news article, and it's about Some Good News, the YouTube channel. And it mentions John Krasinski, who is also exactly the same person as Wikipedia defines at the John Krasinski page. And so here's an example of where we're using strong connectors like about or mentions, as well as links to define how things are related to one another, such as the YouTube channel or the Wikipedia, in order to explain this news article. And this is really fundamental to some of the things that we're going to give as examples as we jump into FAQ. Now, for those of you who like looking at code, which I know is not all of you, so we're going to try to satisfy those of you that are business leaders and strategists as well as technical. But here's an example of what we mean by nesting. So this is the schema markup for this news article that I created in the Schema app editor. And you can see sort of it has the news article, and then the news article is about. So it's really nested. So when we talk about nested, it's a sort of, organized under, that news article. And you can see here we sort of, identified it with the YouTube channel information. And then it also mentions a person, which is the same as, and then we've linked the Wikipedia. And these slides and everything will be available afterwards. But, the idea here is, just like we're going to talk with FAQ, is how do we build these relationships? Now, when we first started, we were, going and trying to figure out how we relate these things by hand. And my co-founder, Mark, was like, there must be a better way of doing this. Hence the birth of the Schema Paths tool. And this is a free tool on the web. So if you go to our website and go under resources, tools, and go to Schema Paths, what you can do is you can put in two different things and find the best way to relate them with the schema markup properties for that class. So Jeff, I know you're missing your hockey team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I thought we would use the example where if we were trying to talk about a page that was about the Toronto Maple Leafs that contained an FAQ, we would actually identify the first kind of topic under the first entity, sports team. And then the second one is an FAQ page. And then we go bing, bada, boom, click to find path. And it would give us a couple options. So it would say that, sports team can be the subject of an FAQ. So if the page was primarily about the sports team, we would use subject of and then nest the FAQ. But let's say like the Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of a big deal. They have like a whole page of FAQs, talking about who their biggest fan is, et cetera. Then we might actually say, well, it's an FAQ page as the primary piece, and it's about the sports team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And so this is a great tool. You absolutely can relate anything. By example, if you wanted to relate a volcano and a gas station, watch, we can do this. So we see that volcano can contain a place of which a gas station is. That might be kind of explosive, so that's probably not the right one. However, the gas station can have an area served of volcano. And so in this case, that would probably be more appropriate. So if this gas station was near Pompeii, for example, we could, say Vesuvius is sort of in its area served. And so, I share this tool because as we get into FAQ and we start talking about how you relate things, it can really help you navigate the schema.org vocabulary and figure out how things are related. Again, it's on our website, free tool. All right, we're ready to dig into FAQ. So what constitutes an FAQ? And it really is just a list of questions and answers pertaining to a specific topic. And that topic can be anything, and it can also, FAQ can live pretty much anywhere. And rich results that result from adopting FAQ schema markup can really bring your content to light. And so here's one example from one of our customers, SAP, where, how do you do ERP systems work? And then this really rich result on the right-hand side that bring that information to life. And so this is, really when we talk about increasing real estate and being strategic in the business on how you use this, it's a great way to make results that maybe don't apply to any other features within Google come to life. And so, FAQ is just one of the 27 different structured data features. So this is Google's developer documentation. And we're going to walk you through sort of what this looks like and sort of how you can use it. FAQ has been around since about May 2019. It's one of our favorites. So Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you. Can you walk us through this feature, please?
Okay, so every rich result has this documentation, and you'll find a list of required properties that you will need to satisfy in order to be eligible for the rich result. Part of what makes FAQ page such low-hanging fruit is that the content requirements for FAQ page are very low. You really just need the full text of a question and the full text of an answer. We'll go through the examples of how you can nest that inside of things or how you're going to organize it, but really that's it. You can have as many questions as you like, and you use the rich results testing tool to check your markup. So this is the rich results test. This tool is used to figure out if your page is eligible for one of the 27 features they list. The FAQ documentation tells you to use this rich results test to check if you're eligible. And actually, this is a really good tool to use even just to get a preview of the rendered HTML that Google will see. And recently they updated it so that if you have any page loading issues, it'll show you that too. So we like it. Now, reading through the developer documentation, you will see examples, guidelines, content guidelines, what's required, recommended. In short, this is what you really need to know. A lot of it is common sense. So your FAQ content should be your own. Users of your website should not be able to submit or create their own answers. If you have a page where users are submitting answers, that's more of a Q&A page like a forum. There should be one answer per one question. Don't use the FAQ rich result for blatantly advertising. So just to break that down a little, FAQs about your business, about your products, about your service, totally fine. But nothing where you're achieving the rich result just with the words buy now or a discount or a link to your shopping cart. Don't do that. And of course, don't mark up anything that's obscene, violent, or awful. Now, there's a few questions that we keep getting in our support, so I wanted to bring them to the front. First is, can I mark up a single question? The answer is yes. You have to follow all the other rules, one answer for that one question, but that's fine. Can I put an FAQ anywhere? Yes, you can, and we are going to show you some examples of how to do that. Number 2, is there a limit to the length of the answer? No, you can have a really long answer, and Google will want the entire text of it, but they might not show the entire text in the rich result.
Jeff, can you talk just like for 1 second, just like the Q&A page versus FAQ page? Can you just sort of go through that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are 2 different rich results. The FAQ rich result is where you'll have a single answer for a single question. You may have seen it in search already. It has the accordion and it drops in answers. You control the answer and that's it. Now, a Q&A page is where there's one question and multiple answers. Usually the answer with the most upvotes by the community for whatever forum page that is a part of will become the best answer. So there's 2 properties. There's the accepted answer, the one with the most upvotes, and all the other user input answers become suggested answers. You might see those in search where it's a carousel of cards, and the one that's the most updated or upvoted, sorry, will have the best answer green text on it.
All right, let's look a little bit about nesting. So Jeff, you want to walk us through sort of like how we start kind of exploring this whole nested schema markup and how it works with FAQ page?
Right, okay, so if you weren't sure how the content would look when we're talking about nesting, this is a visual representation of that. So what we're looking at now is an FAQ section. It's taken from our Schema app website. You can see the whole section is wrapped in a gray box. That represents the FAQ page markup. It's a container for all of the questions and the answers. Next, you'll see that there's the blue box, that's the question, and underneath it, that's the answer. So the way it works is you have an array of questions with an answer, all nested within your FAQ page markup.
Let's get a bit dorky. Look at the code. It's sometimes easier to show it.
Okay, so here's the code for those of you who actually want to see the JSON LD. You can see that the whole FAQ page section here is covered in gray. That's because all of the content, each question, each answer is contained within the FAQ page type. Now, notice each question is nested under the main entity property. Next, look at the array of question and answer schema. The name property of the question, it captures the actual text of the question. So that's where you put that. And the accepted answer property is where the answer schema type is nested. Finally, if you look at that answer schema, you can see that the full text of the answer is set for the text property. That question answer schema relationship is repeated in an array for however many questions your FAQ has.
I'm just grateful we have the schema app editor so we can just like publish this stuff without ever having to write commas and quotes and figure out where everything goes. So it's a blessing for us. Let's talk a little bit about measurement, and then we'll go into some more detailed examples. So, you do the FAQ page schema markup, you figure out all that nesting, you get it live on your site, where do you look to see if it's actually working?
Okay, so the source of truth of how your rich results are looking or performing in search is in Google Search Console. You look at the enhancement report for FAQ. If you go there, you will only see the FAQ result if Google has crawled and indexed your site and found the FAQ markup. You'll get a summary of any errors or warnings, or if your pages are just valid. So this is the summary page, and you can see that there are no current errors, but a number of valid pages. So this is what you're looking for.
All right. Are we all warmed up now? Thank you, Jeff, for getting us through that first piece. Again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We are about to dig into some more detailed examples on how you actually use FAQ with different types of content. And here it's really sort of endeavoring, when you think of the strategy on your site, how do you make sure you're using this tool in your toolkit to really, again, expand the real estate and also bring information to the forefront in search results. So let's start with, again, a basic one, FAQ page. We sort of went through that basic one, but this one we've thrown in one of these other, strong connectors, so about. So if you think of on the left-hand side here, we're gonna have sort of blocks that content as though we were looking at a page. So we have, the FAQ page that says, everything we need to know about Toronto Maple Leafs biggest fan, all the question and answers that follow it suite. And then you can see we are using here the about as a strong connector. nested with a topic or an entity. So this could be, again, Wikipedia or sort of linking to something else on the site. And then again, our main entity with questions and answers. And here's an example of what it looks like in mobile and on search. Again, you're looking to get these, further questions and answers to show up in the search results. And let's look at how the code is. Over to you, Jeff.
Okay, so you can see that the FAQ markup is similar to what we showed before. The blue box is where the question entity is nested under the main entity property, and that it has its own required properties, a name and accepted answer, and that's where the answer schema goes. Then above it, you have the about property, which is attached to the entire FAQ page, and it tells you what is this FAQ actually about.
Excellent. All right, let's keep going and get into some more examples. So let's move into FAQ and organization. And so this may be where there's an entire FAQ page that speaks about your organization. Maybe it's particularities around like how it was founded, about information, about its history. In this case, again, the primary page would be an FAQ page, and then you could link to the organization in different ways. So if the FAQ is specifically about the organization, again, we want to use that strong connector. But you could also link it to the organization as the publisher or the author of the FAQ page. And then again, there you'd have your main entity with your nested questions and answers. This is being well used by Advent Health, in order to surface their frequently asked questions about their organization. You can see it's getting a really great looking result here on mobile, as well as, linking more on Advent Health, so you can link back and kind of read more about these frequently asked questions. Jeff, walk us through sort of how this works.
Okay, so you can see the primary entity of this page is FAQ page, and all the questions and answers are nested in an array underneath it. And then we have the about property where the organization schema is nested. And within it, you have all of the properties available to organization to call out the relevant details of whoever the publisher or whoever this FAQ is about.
And this is like one of those examples, Jeff, where like instead of having organization markup on all pages, you can kind of beautifully nest it here, whether it's about the organization or the organization's the publisher. So this circling back to sort of one of those best practices that we talked about is a great way for you to leverage this connected nested schema markup in order to tell your story and connect things without sort of peanut butter markup across your site. All right, let's keep going into some more of these examples. So FAQs for product and services. And I really love this one because especially for organizations who can't necessarily leverage the product rich results that has ratings or price. If you don't show those for your products, if perhaps you have an enterprise product, FAQ is a great way for you to enhance that result. And so here again, you'd have your page that talks about your product or service. And then, somewhere on the page, again, it doesn't have to be at the top. It could, be having lots of pictures and videos and so forth. You can then sort of also include your FAQ page. And so again, here, the primary page is talking about the product or the service. Just note in schema markup, product is different from service as different types of schema markup. You can then use subject of. No, subject of is sort of the opposite of about. So it's saying it's the subject of this FAQ page and then has the nested properties. And so here's another example, again, where an enterprise offering, has their different FAQ results in order to illustrate and sort of, again, increase real estate on that page. Why don't you walk us through, Jeff, how this works in the code?
Okay, so the primary entity in this section is a product. We're imagining this markup is probably on your product page, and then you have your FAQ page entity underneath that, and then the publisher underneath that. So the product information is super important, the FAQ is important, and the organization is important, but how do you use the properties and nesting to clearly explain the links between those pieces? So product is the most important thing on the page, it's the most primary. The subject of, sort of the inverse property of about, means that this FAQ page is about the product, or the product is the subject of the FAQ, and that FAQ was published by the organization.
Man, I think my brain's gonna explode and I know this stuff. So I think whenever you're looking at this, when we talk about the primary topic of the page is really, maybe going back to your philosophical background, Jeff, at university, we're asking that philosophical question of like, what is this page about, right? To come up with what that top thing is. And so, whether it's like, oh, we're primarily talking about the product, or we're primarily talking about an FAQ about something, it's a really good strategy for sort of as you figure out, where do you start? What's this page actually about? All right, so FAQs are with product, but then also if you have an aggregate rating. And this was, again, an example where, you may have multiple things on the page. So you have an aggregate rating. You might also have price on here, subject of. But what I think the great example is, and, it was from Lily Ray's article on Moz, where she sort of articulated, you can sort of mix these two types of features together. And so, don't think of it as just like, oh, I only can do FAQ. We're going to show an example later that you can do FAQ and how to on the same page. And then depending on the query, Google will pick the appropriate feature in order to show that most satisfies that user. So in this example, you have a product, you have reading, but you want to further try to expand that. And so you can add FAQ on here. So Jeff, walk us through how we would do that.
Okay, so you can see that product is the primary entity for this page. And all of that product information is used to fill out the required and recommended properties for the product rich result, but we can still use the subject of property and nest our FAQ page in there.
Excellent. And so aggregate rating, all those other things you normally do, you'd still do. You just add this additional main entity property with the nested FAQ. All right, so hopefully people are seeing that, FAQ is a really versatile capability within Schema Markup and within the Google features that you can use across your site and across your different content. Let's talk a little bit about blog postings. So, you have a blog post, and within the blog post, you have FAQ-like content. This one's using a bit of a different connector. So has part is the strong connector, the property that we're using, where we can say the blog post literally is made up of parts, and one of those parts is the FAQ page with our nested questions and answers. We use this on our site. So you can see this as a blog post that we have around our microdata filter. So this is sort of, how you can remove microdata that's perhaps being auto-populated by your site. And then we get that really nice, rich result below outlining the questions that we have directly in sort of this article. And so Jeff, can you just like highlight sort of where that has part fits in and sort of, where we put that in?
Absolutely. So blog posting is actually a child type of creative work. There are a bunch of child types of creative work, like article, news article, video object, image object, and so on. One thing they have in common is that has part property, where you can indicate that this creative work or blog post, in our case here, has a particular part that is whatever you define there. And we have nested the FAQ page through the has part property to indicate that this blog post has a section or has a part that's an FAQ.
So Jeff, does that mean for anything that's a creative work? So you mentioned like video object, news article, like you can use FAQ with those in tandem? Absolutely.
Every child type of creative work inherits its parent properties. So that's to say that all of those have the has part property, and FAQ page is an appropriate use of that property. So if you have a video, if you have an image, although an FAQ and an image is interesting to think about, but anytime you have a blog article, you can use the has part property to nest in your FAQ page.
Very cool. All right, this is probably my favorite example, collection page. And, a collection page is really a type of list, and it's actually a list of creative works. So to kind of build on what Jeffrey has been talking about. And, collection page, we often use it if we have just like a bunch of different things. So any of those like really, really detailed landing pages that you have where, you're talking about maybe a service that's done locally and it has FAQs about the service. It has how to contact us or how it works. Might have a video in here. It's often those like really, really long pages. Collection pages is a great way of sort of pulling those things together. And why collection page is really great is that you can actually use properties to define the collection page. Things like about or has part or mentions. And so you can actually, define things about the collection as well as include these additional kind of, I'll say like big things like FAQ pages or how to. And what's also great about this is if you think about the different type of features that Google has, so things such as, videos as well as FAQs and how-tos, really it's up to you to decide how many of these you want to try to put together, and that, it doesn't preclude you from getting one of those features depending on what's most appropriate for the search. So this is, I would say, this gets complicated, but it's a really powerful tool. Again, a more advanced type of list outside of just having like, oh, this is a list of things. It's really a group of things that have certain properties. So Jeff, if you will, can you just walk us through how this comes together and recognizing that it's got a lot of different parts?
Absolutely. This is a common case where you have a really important landing page that's about more than just one thing. And collection page is a very useful schema class because it lets you pull together the schema for your page when you have multiple things that are all equally important. Just as we did with the blog posting example, you can see the FAQ page is in your collection page by using the has part property. But this has more than just an FAQ. It has a how-to section, and it's nested under the has part as well. And you can say that this page is about a product. You can use the mentions to pull in all your other information as well. So collection page is a really useful class when you have multiple things going on a single page.
And just think about, how this might also like connect or point or link things within your own website. So here, we're basically, we built an example, but, we link back to our primary, highlighter product page. We talk about like the different steps, and we could actually link to videos for those different steps, et cetera. So it's a really, really powerful tool on the advanced side, but if you can nail it and figure out your content, we're good here. And that actually like brings up another point is, the examples we're showing you hopefully are, making light bulbs pop up on, what are the type of content or types of content or questions you could add to different pages, whether that be your organization, product, service, collection pages, category pages, et cetera. And so our intent here was to show how, flexible and agile, FAQ is, as part of that schema markup strategy within your organization. Now, there's been an age-old debate and question around FAQ. So when you do an FAQ, it actually pulls the results directly into the search result. And so there's, I think it was Rand Fishkin who I saw speak last year at C3 that Conductor held in New York, where he was talking about like zero-click searches and how, Google's really trying to own that traffic and own that experience. And I agree, and the data shows that we're seeing sort of continued movement that way. The other way, though, to look at it is, Mike Grennan, who's a thought leader in the search space, who's a CMO at Acronym, he often talks about, but the search engine's job is to provide service, and the service is answering questions. And so if we're actually thinking about the user as a central place, then in fact, giving the answer in search is actually great for the user experience. But as we think about strategy and think about sort of, how are we trying to get people to engage with our companies and our brands, there is that question of, should we use FAQ, or does it, really reduce the click-through rate and therefore not allow us to get engaged with that user? And so, we endeavor to look at some data, and this is our beginning of the journey of looking at data across just short of 100 different sites to say, across the different rich results, are we seeing fewer clicks for the FAQ rich results. And again, it's an average over 6 months of data, the last 6 months. And what's interesting is it kind of falls in the middle. Some of this is coming from Search Console, so we know the rich results are being, over time being spread across the different results. So if we look at this in a couple months, we might see that cleaned up a little bit. But we're seeing videos, event details, product results, review snippets. FAQ's kind of sitting in the middle. So I'll say we still will continue to dig into this data and refine this data. But on our, initial passes, looking at how click-through rate compares across the features, we're not seeing it way, way, way at the bottom, which to me for now tells us that we have, it's a suitable strategy to use in order to enhance your rich results. And then also I like to think of it as FAQ bringing some of that customer experience directly into the search results. And so if one of your values, like here at Schema App, is to teach people and share knowledge, or to help them find answers, it's actually a great way of sort of pulling that company value and pulling that sort of rich knowledge directly to where the user is looking for it. Now, there are some strategies though that you can use to further enhance the click-through rate. And so Jeff, can you walk us through how sort of in the answer, how you can also use HTML so that if they want to learn more, go to connected information that they can get there?
Absolutely. Okay, so we're looking at a snapshot pulled from the FAQ page documentation. And in there, it says that the answer may contain HTML content. So you can use HTML tags within your answer text. You can do that to make words bold, have a header, you can create a list, or make part of your text clickable. So if you just wrap the text you want clickable with an anchor tag, when the rich result shows, people can click through to your site. Pretty cool.
Pretty awesome. And if you want to learn more, you can also go to the article that our friend and colleague Lily Ray wrote that talks a little bit more about this there. So in summary, I really do think 2020 is the year of schema markup. And so if you've been doing it for years like us, we can celebrate. If you've been hesitant to do it, I really encourage you to jump in and give it a try. And that connected schema markup really promotes understanding that there's a reason why here at Schema App, we're super nerds with regards to trying to teach you how to nest it and not just feature hunt, but really tell the story about your web content and about your business through schema markup. And that FAQ is a really, really flexible way of enhancing your rich results, across any type of content. And that, if you are looking at click-through rate, our early indications say that your CTR isn't hugely impacted by doing FAQ. But again, you can leverage HTML in the FAQ answer to further ensure or to encourage people to visit your site. My name is Martha Van Broekel. I am the CEO at Schema App, and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. And we really, really hope that you've had a chance to learn from us. You can see our contact information is here. I'm on Twitter. I'm happy to answer questions there. But please, reach out to us if there's learning that you're looking for and want to know more about. We are super passionate about sharing our knowledge and be able to share the different tools and resources, and I'll say the semantics of how we get this done.